Hey guys, tonight we drift back into the warm, dusty folds of myth and marble. You're standing under a pale blue sky that hasn't seen a cloud in weeks. The stones beneath your feet are cracked with ancient sun, the air dry enough to turn. Figs into leather. Off in the distance, goats bleat. Somewhere closer, cicadas begin their high-pitched arguments. But you're not here for livestock or insects. You're standing in the middle of a conflict that isn't loud yet. No swords are drawn, no chariots clatter down cobbled streets. But still, something is coming. A decision, a challenge, a civic. Crisis wrapped in olive leaves and petty godly drama. You're in Attica. More specifically, a rocky citadel that hasn't yet earned the name Athens. But oh, it will. And tonight, you'll learn how that came to be not through conquest, but through agriculture, passive aggression, and one very opinionated goddess who probably won't survive this. At least not if you're a mortal caught in the crossfire of two Olympic deities arguing about property rights. That sort of thing rarely ends well for the humans involved. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Hey, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing which corners of the world we all drift off in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It begins with tension. Not the fun kind, the mythic kind. That slow, invisible build where everyone in town starts whispering before breakfast. Poseidon has been circling Attica like a shark in dress sandals. The city is young, but it's growing. Scrappy, energetic, irritatingly independent. And that makes it valuable. He wants it. Not because he has big plans for civic infrastructure, mind you, but because his rival does. Athena. You might think of her as the bookish goddess with the owl and the helmet, but don't let the calm exterior fool you. Athena is strategic, clever, and quietly competitive in a way that would terrify most consultants. She doesn't shout. She waits. Then she wins. Poseidon, on the other hand, is more of a splash-and-go type. God of the sea, lord of earthquakes, and owner of more seafoam hair product than anyone in Olympus. He wants Attica too, mostly because he doesn't like being told no. And also because he heard Athena was interested. So here you are, caught between them. The locals are concerned. They know what happens when gods get territorial. Crops wither. Rivers reverse. Frogs rain from the sky. The last time Poseidon claimed a region too forcefully, half a mountain slid into the sea. The time before that, someone's cows started singing. So, naturally, the leaders of the region, chieftains, elders, and a few nervous poets call an emergency council meeting. Everyone is invited, which is great until they realize nobody knows how to politely decline a god. The humans make camp on the Acropolis, still a dusty hill at this point. There's no marble temple yet, no grandeur. Just the wind, a few dry shrubs, and the growing sense that something divine is about to go spectacularly sideways. Then it happens. A rumble, a salt-smelling gust of wind. The sky darkens in that overly dramatic way Greek gods seem to prefer. And with a roar that sounds like a dozen conch shells being stepped on, Poseidon arrives. He doesn't walk. He appears. Like a wave slapping down on dry stone, he materializes atop the hill with a grin and a beard full of driftwood. He raises his trident, and with a sharp crack of lightning and smug satisfaction, slams it into the rocky earth. The ground splits. Out bursts a geyser of seawater. Sort of. Technically, it's a spring gurgling, salty, and slightly sulfuric. The kind of water that might keep a camel alive but definitely won't win any awards for refreshment. A few dolphins allegedly peek through the spout before vanishing. Someone claps politely. This, Poseidon declares, is his gift. A water source from the sea. Salt included. The elders eye it suspiciously. Salt water is ... well, abundant. They live near the coast. It's not exactly rare. And there's the issue of it killing crops. Still, no one says anything. Not yet. Poseidon smirks. The kind of smirk that says, beat that. And oh, she does. With no thunderclap, no foghorn arrival, Athena appears a few paces away. There's no fanfare. She simply walks up, cloak gathered, eyes sharp, quiet as a thought. She carries no weapon, just a glance that makes everyone stand a little straighter. Where Poseidon brought spectacle, Athena brings stillness. She looks at the sea spring, considers its bubbling shallowness, and nods once. Then, stepping forward, she kneels and presses her fingers to the ground. And where her hand touches stone, something miraculous and completely unremarkable begins to grow. A tree, small at first, just a sprout. Then a twig. Then slowly, steadily, the olive tree rises from the rock. Pale green. Leaves, silvery undersides. Tiny buds that hint at fruit. The bark looks ancient, even though it's only seconds old. Athena straightens. She says nothing. Everyone leans in. A tree? That's the gift? Poseidon crosses his arms. Somewhere nearby, a goat sneezes dramatically, but the elders, they begin to murmur. Quietly at first, then louder. Some nod. One reaches out and touches the bark. It's cool. It smells faintly of dust and sunlight. Someone plucks a leaf, rubs it between calloused fingers. They recognize the usefulness, the calm, the promise. Poseidon frowns. This is the beginning of a very long, very leafy argument, and the tree? It just stands there, innocent, wise, absolutely unaware of the civic unrest it's about to cause. So now you have two gifts, one noisy, one quiet. One dramatic, one botanical, and both of them stand in the open air atop a sun-bleached hill that isn't quite a city yet. But oh, how close it's getting. Poseidon doesn't say much after. The tree arrives, but his silence is not the serene kind. It's the vibrating, clenched jaw kind. He watches the olive tree with the wary eyes of a man who just got outperformed at a potluck. Because let's be honest, he brought water. Sort of salty, possibly cursed water that smells vaguely like wet rope. Athena brought a living pantry, a future economy. Something you can rub on your skin, feed to your goats, light in your lamp, and dip your bread in. And Poseidon? Poseidon brought a soggy puddle with theatrical ambition. Still, this is ancient Greece. Theatrics count for something. Probably more than they should. The people of Attica gather around. Elders stroke their beards. Wives whisper to one another in that pointed way that makes you think they already know who they'll vote for. A few teenagers try tasting the spring water and immediately spit it back out. Meanwhile, Athena just waits. There's a quiet strength in that. No demand, no thunderbolt. Just her and a tree that seems to have already settled in like it owns the place. But Poseidon isn't done being Poseidon. Because what's a Greek god without a good tantrum? With a low growl like a storm boiling under the sea, he stomps back to the salt spring, raises his trident, and jabs it again. A second fountain shoots up higher this time. He scowls at the elders as if daring them to ignore it. The air fills with the smell of brine and pride. Someone coughs. A donkey brays in the distance, which isn't helpful. The humans, caught between two divine egos and one very unpotable water feature, do what humans do best. They delay. A committee is formed. 12 citizens are selected, 6 men, 6 women, which, in itself, is rare. You see, in most ancient Greek civic decisions, women weren't usually given a vote, but this one's mythic. And myths play by their own rules. Each juror is given one job: decide which god's gift is better. and therefore, which god should become the official patron of this not-quite city. Historians still argue whether this mythical jury was symbolic of an early Athenian democracy or just a clever way to add tension to a divine popularity contest. But here's what they agree on. This moment matters because it's not just about a tree or a puddle. It's about identity. Whoever wins gets naming rights, gets temples, gets Tuesdays probably. The loser? Well, they get bitter as the sun sets. The jurors retreat to consider. Poseidon glowers. Athena polishes her helmet with terrifying patience. Somewhere nearby, the olive tree rustles in the breeze, entirely unbothered by its role in shaping Western civilization. But before the jury can decide, there's one more thing you need to know. The gifts were more than offerings. They were arguments. Poseidon's salt spring, though impractical, symbolized power, sea trade, naval dominance, protection from raiders, sure, but also the threat of flood and vengeance. His was the gift of strength, sharp and wet and loud. Athena's olive tree? It promised longevity. Agriculture, trade, food, light, medicine. Its usefulness was quieter, but relentless. It didn't demand obedience. It offered partnership. One of these gifts would shape a war machine, the other, a civilization. So when the jury reconvened under the light of the full moon, their decision was already whispered among the marble. They chose Athena. Just barely. One vote tipped the scale. One legend says it was a woman's vote that made the difference. And because of this, some say Poseidon, spiteful as ever, declared that women would never vote again in Athens, which would explain some things. Historians still debate whether this part of the myth reflects actual legal changes or just retroactive justification. It's murky. But then again, all old stories are. Poseidon, as expected, does not take the loss gracefully. He lets out a howl of wind so sharp it flattens 2 fig carts on the south road. He curses the hill. He floods the lowlands. He turns the sky purple for an hour and a half, which is very inconvenient for early farmers. But then he leaves. With a wave of salt and a final splashy flourish, he vanishes into the sea, muttering something about fickle mortals and inferior foliage. Athena? She stays. And so does the tree. It is now the symbol of her favor, planted firmly in the heart of what will become Athens. The citizens mark the spot. They place stones around it. They build a small shrine. Eventually, they'll build a temple. Then a city. Then a memory so persistent it echoes into classrooms and bedtime stories for the next 2,000 years. And the tree, still just a sapling, keeps growing. It won't bear fruit for a while. Olives are slow that way. But when it does, it will feed armies and oil lamps, moisturize elbows and annoying heroes. Not bad for a peace offering. So ends the first official godly turf war in Athenian myth. With a tree, a tantrum, and a dozen humans nervously sipping milk under the stars. You, however, are still there, still standing on that sun-bleached rock, listening to the breeze move through olive branches and wondering what happens next. The thing is, you've never really looked at an olive before. Not closely. Not the kind that shows up on overpriced cheese boards or masquerades as pizza toppings. No, we're talking about the original olives, the kind growing from Athena's very first sapling, still clinging to the rocky hill that hasn't even fully decided to be Athens yet. They're smaller than you expect. Not glossy. Not pre-pitted. A kind of dusty green with a tough, leathery skin and an attitude that says, you'll need to work for this flavor. Which, of course, you do. The ancient Greeks didn't just bite into them raw. That would be like chewing a bottle of nail. Polish remover, bitter, aggressive, and deeply unwise. Instead, they cured them, soaked them in brine or lye, buried them in ash, left them to mellow out like cranky philosophers in a shaded symposium, and the oil? That was the real treasure, golden. Fragrant, slightly peppery, pressed not with machines, but with stones, patience, and feet. You'd gather the fruit, crush it in a stone basin, then press it beneath flat weights, letting the oil trickle out like sunlight bleeding into a clay jar. It was liquid wealth. Burned in lamps, rubbed into skin, poured over bread, mixed with herbs and used as medicine. Sometimes, in particularly extravagant rituals, it was even offered to the gods themselves, because, as you've already learned, gods love drama, but they also appreciate a well-oiled statue, and this is what Athena gave them. Not just a tree, a system, a quiet empire of roots and leaves and trade. Because here's where things get interesting. That tree, the very first olive in Attica, wasn't just symbolic. It eventually seeded groves, and those groves became commerce. And that commerce became colonies. You don't conquer with olive oil, but you do build relationships and wealth and influence. The Greeks exported amphorae of oil across the Mediterranean, stamped with city emblems like proud little passport photos. Athenian olive oil was so respected, it was sometimes used as prize money in athletic competitions. Win a blowin. Foot trace? Congratulations. Here's a big jar of grease. You're starting to see it now, aren't you? The real genius of Athena's gift wasn't its flashiness, it was its persistence, its adaptability, its utterly uncheckable usefulness. Poseidon had salt water and splashes. Athena had agriculture and supply chains. Historians still argue whether the myth of the olive tree reflects actual agrarian shifts in early Greek society, or whether it's just a tidy origin story. But one thing's for sure, the olive tree stuck around. It appears on coins. It's carved into temple friezes. It crowns the heads of victorious athletes. It shadows quiet conversations in shaded courtyards. And yes, it eventually becomes protected. By law. You damage a sacred olive tree? That's not vandalism, that's heresy. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. For now, let's go back to that early grove. The one that sprouted from Athena's first sapling. It doesn't happen overnight, of course. Olives are notoriously slow growers. They take their time. But once they're rooted, they stay rooted. That's part of the appeal. You, standing barefoot on the warm dirt, can imagine how those first farmers felt. Digging around the shallow roots, brushing away stones, plucking the fruit, crushing it between stone rollers, waiting for the golden trickle of oil to seep out. It probably didn't smell all that different from the olive oil. You know, today rich, grassy, slightly sharp, and in that moment, maybe, someone looked at that bowl of oil and thought, Athena knew what she was doing, which is more than you can say for most deities. Of course, the tree itself didn't just live in a field. It lived in politics. Because from the moment the jury chose Athena, that sapling stopped being a plant and started being a flag. It was the visible sign of her favor. And by extension, of the city's legitimacy. A lot of cities back then claimed divine heritage. You'd say, oh yes, we're descended from Hercules, or this fountain was dug by Artemis herself, and hope nobody asked for documentation. But Athens had a tree. A living, rooted, growing piece of myth, just standing there. On the Acropolis. It was proof. You could see it. Which is how a tree became more than a tree, and how Athena's quiet, leafy victory turned into something much bigger than a single civic win. You begin to notice how much weight this one plant carries. Not literally, it's still a small, wiry thing, but symbolically, it's massive. The olive becomes sacred, not in the fire and brimstone way, but in that reverent, ritualized, quietly untouchable way. The way you might treat a family heirloom or a particularly beautiful lie. Only now, You're wondering something. What happens when people start to disagree about who really owns the tree? You're not the only one, because as the city grows, so does its ambition. And soon, Athena's tree isn't just sacred, it's valuable. Which means people start fighting over it. And you know what that means? More arguments, more rules, more mildly passive-aggressive decrees written on clay tablets, but that's for later. For now, you're still in the early days. The air smells of warm stone and crushed leaves. The sun is beginning to slide behind the hills, casting long shadows through the grove. You pick an olive. It's bitter, but you smile anyway, because you know what it's going to become. You hold the olive in your hand a moment longer. It's small, wrinkled, a little dusty from the breeze. It doesn't look like it's about to change the course of an entire civilization, but history has a sense of humor like that. As you wander back toward the city center, or what passes for a city center in early Athens, you start to notice something. The tree is not just a symbol. It's a conversation starter, a status marker, a subject of poetry, politics, and public jealousy. And you, sleepy time traveler that you are about to overhear some of the first debates that sound suspiciously like city council meetings, because with this new divine patron and her sacred tree comes the matter of civic development. Athena's chosen city needs infrastructure, temples, fountains, voting spaces, and most importantly, olive storage. The people of Athens now have an economic engine, a slow-growing, squishy one, but still. Olive oil becomes their export identity. Amphories stamped with little owls begin making their way to ports as far-flung as Egypt, Carthage, and Sicily, which brings us to something deeply, deliciously boring. Ancient Greek agriculture. Now, you may not have arrived tonight hoping to hear about soil acidity and seasonal pruning techniques, but don't worry, we'll keep it gentle. The Greeks learned quickly that olive trees liked rocky soil. Not lush, loamy farmland. No, they preferred the tough stuff. The kind of terrain that barely tolerated wheat or barley. And this made olives perfect for Attica. This wasn't just a plant. It was a strategy. With olives, you could use the craggy, hilly places other crops would scowl at. You didn't need heavy rainfall, just a bit of patience. A few decades of it. Yes, decades. It takes nearly 15 years for an olive tree to become commercially productive, which makes olive farmers the ultimate optimists. Or the ultimate procrastinators. It depends how you frame it. And yet, they planted. Groves spread across the hillsides like quiet green armies. They gave shade, fruit, oil, and prestige. But they also came with rules. You see, not just anyone could plant or cut down an olive tree in Athens, especially not the sacred ones. There were laws, real, enforceable ones, protecting Athena's gift. Historians still debate the exact date these laws were enacted, but by the time of Solon, the famed Athenian lawmaker, cutting down a sacred olive tree could get you banished. Or worse, fined. You might have hoped for a more dramatic punishment, but this is Athens. Nothing says, "You're dead to us," like an aggressively detailed tax penalty. The legal texts were clear. Even private citizens could only uproot a limited number of olive trees per year. The rest had to be preserved partly for economic reasons, partly out of reverence. So naturally, someone tried to break the rules. There's a story, half fact, half legend, about a farmer who chopped down one of the sacred olives under cover of darkness. The details are fuzzy. Some versions say he was trying to expand his field. Others claim he wanted firewood. One account insists he simply didn't believe the laws applied to him. He was wrong. A tribunal was called. Witnesses were gathered. The stump was measured, its roots examined. The court even summoned the local olive inspectors. Yes, that was a real job title to verify the tree's sacred status. It was, in modern terms, a full-on arbor trial. The verdict? Guilty of something between sacrilege and environmental crime. Sentence? Exile, which feels fitting in a culture that treated civic space like sacred ground. You mess with the trees, you mess with the city, but not all trees were treated equally. Only the original olive, the one Athena gave them, and its direct offspring held this special status. They were called Morii, a word that means belonging to the goddess. These weren't trees. They were property of Athena, extensions of her original gift, tended not just by farmers, but by the state itself. The Areopagus Council, the same one responsible for major legal and religious matters, oversaw them. So next time someone complains about their HOA being too intense, remind them that ancient Athens had literal government assigned olive guardians. And what did they do exactly? They inspected the trees, measured their growth, reported signs of disease or improper trimming, filed formal complaints if someone tried to sneak a Moria into their fireplace. It was like environmental protection, but with togas and votive offerings. Olive oil production became state business. Temples stored the best batches. Athletes received it in gleaming jars, prizes for excellence. Soldiers rubbed it on their skin before battle, not just for show, but for warmth, muscle readiness, and possibly spiritual blessing. Even funerals involved oil anointing the body, scenting the pyre, softening the cloths of mourning. All from a tree that one goddess quietly planted on a hill. You stop now, standing beneath one of its descendants. The breeze moves through the branches with a soft hiss, like the whisper of parchment pages. And maybe, just maybe, you begin to feel it. The gentle weight of continuity, because what Athena gave wasn't just sustenance. It was patience, process, a trust in what grows slowly but endures, not the flash of divine water, but the quiet drip of oil into clay. So you sit, and you watch, and the tree does what trees do best. It waits. You're sitting under the tree, still. The breeze smells faintly of dust and green things. A bee hums past your ear, giving your presence a quick audit before buzzing deeper into the leaves. Overhead, the olive branches sway like they're thinking about something. And down the hill, the first argument is beginning. It's not a loud one. Not yet. But there's a definite tone. That distinct, dry sort of, well actually, that only ever means trouble. Because when gods give gifts, mortals are left to interpret the fine print. And interpretation, you're learning, means endless. Human discussion. The scene. A group of civic leaders gathered at the base of the Acropolis, likely under a hastily erected awning. The sun is too hot for drama, but that doesn't stop them. They've got clay tablets and opinions, and maybe a bowl of olives to snack on if they're feeling bold. You shuffle a bit closer. Not to eavesdrop, of course, just to observe. Very ethically. They're debating a problem that has no name yet, but it will. It's the issue of how to honor Athena's gift properly. Should there be a yearly ceremony? A special tax? A carved relief on every amphora? Should citizens be required to plant new groves? Should they build a temple right next to the tree or give it some breathing room? One fellow, with an impressive beard and terrible sandals, insists the tree should be left entirely alone, untouched, unused, a sacred relic, not a harvest. Another counters that Athena didn't gift them a decoration. She gave them a resource. A slow-growing miracle that could, if managed wisely, feed thousands and fund the navy. The room, or rather, the tent dash divides. And here it is. The first real civic debate over Athena's olive tree. Not the last. Historians still argue whether this meeting actually happened or was a later dramatization of Athenian values. But the storytelling sticks around for a reason. It shows something crucial. Even myths need management. And this, my sleepy friend, is where it all begins. They decide to split the difference, a compromise. The most Greek solution of all, the original. Tree. The tree will remain untouched, a living monument. But the city will plant other groves, draw cuttings from the sacred mother tree, and use those to build the economy. Thus begins a curious duality. Some trees are holy, some are helpful, and some are both, depending on how you squint. To keep track, they invent rituals. A priestess or sometimes a state-appointed olive official would bless the cuttings before they were taken. Farmers would recite short prayers while planting, calling on Athena for health, longevity, and no surprise frosts. Children would be told never to climb a Moria tree, lest they disturb the goddess herself. It was all very practical. And very sacred. Over time, this blend of agriculture and worship bled into other things. Marriage ceremonies, for instance, often included olive wreaths, a nod to prosperity, stability, and quiet strength. Military heroes were crowned with them. So were poets. So were philosophers. If they were lucky enough to avoid being punched in the agra for saying something too clever. You walk now through the early city as these traditions begin to form. The homes are simple low stone walls, flat roofs, goats lounging in the shade like tiny smug gods. But the conversations are complex. Philosophical, even. What does it mean, someone mutters behind you, to have a goddess who plants trees instead of throwing lightning? It's a fair question. Athena is, after all, a war goddess too. But not the kind who smashes cities. She strategizes, plans, prefers battles that are won before they're fought. And this tree? It's a form of warfare too. Just slower, rooted, more. Patient. It doesn't conquer. It endures. And in that endurance, it reshapes the city. Someone else proposes a festival, something annual, with dances, offerings, and a kind of friendly olive branch waving contest. That idea doesn't quite take hold, probably because waving branches in front of each other lacks a certain pizzazz, but it plants the seed, no pun intended, for larger civic rituals. The Panathenia, in fact, will grow from this very kind of civic conversation, a citywide festival in honor of Athena, including competitions, sacrifices, and the presentation of a new woven robe to her statue. But that's a few decades off. Right now, they're still just figuring out the basics. Someone builds a small stone enclosure around the original tree to keep it safe. Another citizen suggests setting up a watchman. That idea is rejected for being weirdly possessive. But eventually, guards will be posted, and the tree will be protected like state treasure, because by now it is. One old farmer, leathery and barefoot, mutters that Poseidon's salt spring never needed this much babysitting. Everyone ignores him. You pause to look at the tree again. Not the sacred original, but a daughter one of many planted across Attica. Its leaves flicker in the evening light, silver on one side, dark green on the other, like coins. Or secrets. You. Think about all the things that tree has become. A political symbol, a dietary staple, a divine marker, a source of both revenue and reverence. And all from something most people walk past without noticing. You're not most people though. You're still awake, still watching, still listening to the rustle of those leaves as they argue with the wind and agree with the earth. A child darts past you, giggling, chased by a dog. Someone nearby begins to sing a low, slow tune in an unfamiliar dialect. The notes melt into the air like oil into water. You feel the city rising around you, not with noise, but with intention, with shape, with memory. And at the center of it, all quietly demanding nothing but receiving everything. Is a tree. You wake, or maybe you never really slept, still seated near one of Athena's olive trees. The sky above you is pale now, the kind of early light that doesn't yet cast shadows but promises that it will soon. The streets below the Acropolis are stirring, and with them, so is a new kind of ceremony, because today is not just about oil or offerings. Today, 12 citizens will make a decision. They're seated in a semicircle on smooth stone benches beneath an awning stretched taut. By sun-bleached rope, their robes rustle softly as they shift. Clay cups of watered wine are passed. It's not a court, exactly, but the air has that weighty hush you only find before a vote. They are judges, chosen not by lottery, but by some ritualistic combination of age, wisdom, and availability. And they've been tasked with something uncomfortably complex, upholding balance between gods and mortals, between symbol and survival. They're here to finalize the tree's place, not in myth, but in law, because Athena's gift, while beautiful, has become a little too successful. And now people are arguing. Some farmers want more olive groves. Some think the state should control them entirely. Others worry that treating the tree like a public asset opens it to misuse. There's talk of guilds, tax codes, even whether you can be charged rent for shade. And the gods? Silent. Athena, as ever, offers no divine footnotes. Poseidon, probably off pouting underwater somewhere, makes no title threats. It's up to the humans now. So the judges sit. They listen to orators. They examine olive branches. They run fingers along amphora inscriptions, muttering about trade volume and mythic intention. One woman, gray-haired, eyes sharp as goat thorns, says simply, "If the goddess gave it, we must keep it alive." She doesn't mean the tree. She means the story. Because the story is the law. It's the reason people plant carefully and prune with prayers. It's the reason no one lights bonfires near the groves. It's why the oil pressed from the oldest trees is poured in libation before any is sold at market. The story shapes behavior. And behavior, in a city, becomes policy. Historians still argue whether this particular vote was real or allegorical. Some say it echoes Solon's reforms. Others claim it predates the city's democratic phase entirely. But regardless of its historical truth, the myth carried legal teeth, the judge's vote. And just like that, Athena's gift becomes more than legend. It becomes law. The tree is declared sacred property, not owned by a person, not by the city, not even by the temple god, by the goddess alone. It's the first time a plant gets its own version of diplomatic immunity. But what happens next is even stranger, because now that the tree is protected, the citizens begin to perform their protection. Watchmen are assigned. Rituals are created. At sunrise on certain festival days, people bow to the tree not because anyone told them to, but because tradition begins that way, with small gestures that feel important, even if no one fully knows why. And so the cult of the olive begins, not a literal cult with robes and tambourines, but a slow, collective reverence that spreads from law into daily habit. You hear a merchant murmur before opening his stall, "Let the leaves stay green." You see a child pause before picking up a fallen branch, holding it like it might whisper back. You notice that even during arguments, no one raises their voice within the grove's edge. It's not that they think the tree will strike them down. It's that they've decided not to test it. You wander through the city's agora now, watching oil jars being hauled onto carts. One amphora tips slightly, and a young porter scrambles to right it, checking the seal like it's a newborn chick. This batch, someone says, is destined for Ephesus, that one for Cyrene. A few jars will be sent to the Olympic Games prize. Oil for wrestlers and runners. And all of it, traces back to that one gift, Athena's leafy, low-maintenance offering. It's funny, really. The gods often destroy things in Greek myths. Cities, heroes, families, rain forecasts. But here's a case of a god planting something instead. And that one, quiet act spiraled into policy, culture, and economy, which leads us to the strangest part of today's civic rituals. The feather. You notice it on one of the judges. Robes a small owl feather tucked into his sash. It's subtle, but unmistakable. A symbol of Athena, yes. But also a reminder. The owl doesn't screech. It watches. It waits. It sees and the citizens, adopting that patience, begin modeling their city in the image of their goddess, not just through temples, but through behaviors. Quiet. Strength. Strategic thinking. Measured decisions. Even their debates take on a rhythm heated, yes, but punctuated with silences. With nods. With olive oil lamp refills and muttered metaphors. Athenian democracy, if it can be called at this early, isn't loud yet. It's still practicing. But in its center stands that tree, the unblinking gift, the root of law, the whisper of myth, wrapped in bark and shadow. You turn back up the hill now, retracing your steps as the sun climbs higher. There's a breeze, and in it, the faint peppery scent of crushed olive leaves. You breathe it in, and feel, somehow, a little more lawful. You climb slowly back toward the Acropolis, sandals slipping slightly on loose stones worn smooth by 1,000 steps before yours. The tree, Athena's first and finest gift, comes into view once more. It's taller now, fuller, its leaves shimmering. Silver in the morning sun. And beneath its shade, something new has sprouted, not from the ground, but from the people. Reverence. You watch as a man approaches the tree. He's not wealthy. His cloak is patched, his shoes the kind that sigh when he walks. In his hand he holds a small jar clay, roughly glazed, maybe homemade. He kneels beside the trunk, not dramatically, but with quiet intention, and pours a few drops of olive oil onto the roots. An offering. Not because anyone told him to. Not because there's a priest demanding sacrifice. Just because the tree has taken root in their minds. But here's the twist. With reverence comes consequence. The more sacred something becomes, the more fragile it feels. And fragile things require guardianship. That's when trouble begins to blossom quietly, like mold under a basket of figs. Because people start noticing things. Like, who gets to harvest the olives closest to the sacred grove? And, are you allowed to plant your olive tree near that olive tree, or is that considered encroachment? Also, what do we do if a sacred tree gets sick? These questions aren't theoretical anymore. The sacred tree, the one planted by Athena herself, is showing signs of age. Its branches are a little brittle. Its bark is darkened. Some leaves are curling at the edges. The kind of things that might mean nothing, or everything. And now, the city is whispering. Is it dying? Can it die? Is it even a tree anymore, or something stranger, something half myth, half wood? Historians still debate whether this original tree ever truly died. Some sources claim it was burned by invaders during the Persian sack of Athens. Others insist it regenerated from its roots, phoenix-like, pushing up a new shoot as if to say, nice try. Either way, this moment, this brittle season, becomes a turning point. Because suddenly, people are scared. They've tied their city's fate to this tree so tightly that a bit of leaf curl feels like a political omen. And in their fear, they do something very human. They build a fence. Not just any fence. A marble enclosure with inscriptions. And a small altar. They don't call it a cage, but it is. It's meant to protect the tree. But it also makes it harder to touch, to approach. To know. The sacred becomes distant, and that's when someone gets an idea. We should plant a second. Just in case. You? Sigh. You know where this is going. At first, it's framed as a backup. A just in case the sacred root system weakens situation. But then that second tree grows well. Too well. Its oil is sweet. Its branches are thick. And before long, some begin whispering, what if this tree is the real heir? It's olive politics now. You're standing in a city where mythology has slipped into municipal management, where gardeners have become high-ranking officials, and debates over pruning methods are thinly disguised arguments about tradition, trust, and civic identity. One man suggests counting the olives from each tree to determine divine favor. Another proposes a dream oracle to consult Athena directly. A poet writes a satire about dueling groves and is promptly asked to go recite it somewhere else. It's funny in a tired kind of way, because no one really wants to fight over a tree. They want what the tree represents: stability, continuity, the illusion that if this one thing stays rooted, maybe the rest of the city will too. You lean against a stone pillar, watching the shadows of both trees flicker across the courtyard. The original and the backup, the sacred and the just in case. Their branches sway like arms in gentle disagreement, and in the midst of all this, you hear the faintest sound. Pruning shears someone, under the cover of twilight, has taken. A cutting it's not just gardening it's treason.c. The law is clear now. No one is allowed to take cuttings from the sacred tree, or any moriae without approval from the Areopagus. Doing so is not just theft. It's a violation of civic and divine trust. But this person, well, they probably had reasons. Maybe they believed the tree was dying and wanted to preserve its lineage. Maybe they just wanted oil for their family. Or maybe, just maybe, they thought the rules didn't apply to them. They're wrong. The next day, word spreads like wildfire whipped by a mountain breeze. A twig is missing. A guard is questioned. The Areopagus calls an emergency session, and just like that, the olive tree has caused its first civic scandal. Not a war. Not a rebellion, just a snip of wood. But that's the power of sacred things. They don't explode, they erode, slowly, delicately, like leaves falling one at a time, until someone finally notices the tree is bare. You sit down beside a boy tending a younger tree. He's maybe 12, speckled with dirt, humming to himself. You ask him what he's doing. Helping her grow, he says, and when you ask who her is, he blinks, surprised you don't know. The tree, he says, Athena's daughter. He pours water at the roots, and for a moment, everything is quiet again. You sit beside the boy for a while, watching his fingers press into the soil as if he could coax wisdom from the dirt. His olive sapling, Athena's so-called daughter, leans slightly in the breeze, a little stubborn, a little delicate, like the city itself. But even here, even now, the god who lost hasn't entirely left Poseidon. You haven't forgotten him, have you? He may not have won the land, but he didn't slink away into the sea like a barnacle-scorned villain. No, gods don't forget slights, especially not the ones handed down by mortals. So while Athena's tree flourishes, Poseidon lingers. In whispers, in floods, in the smell of the harbor when the tides churn just wrong, and in storms. You notice it one summer afternoon, years after the tree's first budding. The city's grown now, homes climbing the hillsides, olive presses dotting. The edge of town, amphories stacked like alphabet blocks in storage courtyards. Life is moving. But suddenly, so is the sky. Dark clouds roll in fast, strange for this season. Thunder rumbles low, like a god clearing his throat with ill intent. You glance toward the sea and for a moment, swear you see a flash of trident-shaped. Lightning over the horizon, then comes the downpour, not gentle, not playful, no. This is the kind of rain that rearranges roads and flood cellars. The kind that lifts stones and carries away loaves from market stalls. The kind that strikes trees, specifically olive trees, with unerring precision. When it ends, the sacred grove has been hit, One tree, not the tree, but a close descendant, lies blackened at the root, charred, smoking faintly. Was it just lightning, or a very old grudge? Historians still argue whether early Athenians interpreted such storms as divine retaliation or merely unfortunate weather. But myth tends to color memory. And so, quietly, people begin to speak of Poseidon's discontent. He didn't win the city, but maybe, just maybe, he's still poking at its edges. You walk through the grove the morning after the storm. The air is thick with petrichor wet stone, broken bark, the scent of rain-soaked herbs. One tree is scorched, the rest are shaken. And so is the city. The Areopagus calls for ritual appeasement. A sacrifice nothing too dramatic, perhaps a bull or a trio of goats. A libation poured into the earth. A hymn sung at the temple of Poseidon at Sunion, just to show they haven't forgotten him entirely. It's damage control, myth style, but the people aren't convinced. Some whisper that Athena should have protected the grove. Others claim it's a warning about over-reliance on a single crop. A few very tired farmers suggest that maybe they just need better drainage. Still, the fear lingers, and that's when the real trouble begins, not from the gods, but from the sea pirates, not the romantic kind with sashes and sea shanties. These are opportunistic raiders sailing from parts unknown, driven by hunger, greed, and the easy pickings of a city distracted. By its own symbolism, they strike the port, steal amphorae, kidnap merchants, burn one of the warehouse roofs. And guess what they take? Olive oil. Crates and crates of it. Because by now, Athenian olive oil isn't just useful, it's famous, recognizable, valuable. A liquid luxury traded across the Mediterranean like perfume, or perfume slightly slicker. Cousin, the theft isn't just a loss of goods, it's an insult. A theft of identity. And Poseidon's fingerprints are all over it. Not literally. The raiders are mortal, but the sea? The sea is his. And everyone knows it. Athena may rule the land, but Poseidon rules movement, ships, storms, opportunity. If Athena's olive trees make Athens strong, Poseidon can make sure no one receives what they grow. The city takes action. They begin fortifying the port, building better walls, organizing watchmen. They commission fast ships, swift and narrow, meant to patrol the coastline and chase down raiders. These aren't warships, exactly, more like olive guardians. Security vessels for a precious cargo. Athens starts to understand something important. Divine gifts need protection, even from other gods. You walk the docks now, watching laborers load oil jars into padded crates. There's a nervous energy in the air, like everyone's waiting for something. An apology from the sea, perhaps, or just a calm day. One sailor rubs a coin before boarding. The owl of Athena gleams on one side. The other side? A wave pattern. A nod to Poseidon just in case. Dual devotion is the Athenian way now. Practical piety. You hear merchants offering small prayers to both gods before sealing their cargo. To Athena for growth, they mutter, and to Poseidon for delivery. You smirk. Divine politics make for excellent business strategies. But, back in the city, something curious is happening. People have started planting olive trees in unusual places, not just in groves or gardens, but in courtyards, beside fountains, even along street corners. Each tree is tagged with a scrap of ribbon. Some blue for Poseidon, some green for Athena. A few are both. No one says exactly why they're doing it, but you understand that it's about balance. A quiet truce between powers that don't truly forgive, but might tolerate each other if properly honored. And the trees? They don't mind that they grow regardless. They bend in the wind, drink what they're given, and never complain when their fruit is taken. As the sun sets, you pass a tiny tree beside a bakery. The smell of honey cakes and ash drifts through the doorway. The baker has lit a small oil lamp in the window. Athena's oil, Poseidon's wind, your sleep. All of it balanced. All of it, somehow, rooted in one tree and two very dramatic siblings. Night again. The kind of Athenian night that slips in slowly, with the sound of sandals on cobblestone and soft laughter drifting in from a nearby courtyard. The city doesn't sleep early, but it does quiet down, letting its walls exhale. You're walking beneath rows of olive trees, now trees planted generations after Athena's first, but still seen as family. Their gnarled trunks lean slightly with age, the way elders do when telling long stories. The leaves shimmer under lantern light. You pause to press a hand to the bark. It's cool, ancient feeling. And beneath your fingers, you're touching something more than wood. You're touching wealth, power, cultural gravity, pressed into pulp and poured into pots. You're touching the reason Athens can afford to argue all day, because that's what this has become, hasn't it? Not just a sacred tree, not just a divine gift, but a commodity, a currency. And like any valuable thing in human hands, it's been turned into a tool and occasionally a weapon. By now, olive oil fuels more than lamps. It lubricates trade agreements. It buys votes. It funds art. It heals wounds and slicks wrestling champions and seals diplomatic treaties. It's rubbed into babies and smeared on dying men. And it's taxed. Oh yes. Athens begins to formalize its olive oil economy with signature precision. Records are kept. Export tallies are inscribed on stone. Merchants file claims for spoiled shipments. Disputes over measurement lead to the invention of standard amphorae. Historians still debate how early this regulation began, some citing the 6th century BCE, others tracing it to Solon's reforms, but what's certain is that oil became one of the first truly regulated goods in Athens. And with regulation comes rules, and with rules come loopholes, which is how you end up listening to an oil merchant explain, with remarkable sincerity, that the oil in his cracked amphora technically spilled due to divine will and therefore shouldn't be taxed. He cites Poseidon's wind. He gestures skyward. He gets fined anyway. The city's oil inspectors, called estinomoi, are now minor celebrities. Equal parts bureaucrats and priests, they visit presses, check storage vessels, and sometimes even smell the oil to detect spoilage or fraud. You can't help but imagine someone earning a full-time wage as an olive oil sniffer. But hey, dream jobs are dream jobs. But the best oil? That's not sold at the market. It's awarded to winners of the Panathenaic Games. You arrive at the stadium just in time to witness it, an oiled wrestler grappling under the mid-morning sun, cheered on by a sweaty, wildly invested crowd. No one here is calm. Even the stone benches seem to radiate competition. And the prize? Not coins. Not laurels. Jars. Glorious painted jars of pure, sacred, government-approved olive oil. Dozens of amphorae, each taller than a goat and twice as valuable. Enough to support a household for a year. Enough to fund a new business. Enough to, if you're clever, sell discreetly to foreign buyers at a tidy profit. And the jars themselves? Works of art. Black figure illustrations of Athena on one side, the event, wrestling, running, javelin throwing on the other. Functional trophies. Civic advertisements. One wrestler receives his prize and kisses the amphora's rim with exaggerated flair. The crowd laughs. Somewhere in the stands, a potter grins. His workshop's mark is etched subtly near the base. You wander through the rows of prizes later, admiring their smooth shapes and oily scent. One amphora leaks slightly, a tiny glisten of gold pooling at its foot. You resist the urge to dip a finger. It's fascinating, isn't it? A tree gifted by a goddess becomes oil. Oil becomes prize. Prize becomes status. Status becomes policy. And policy becomes identity. Which is why the theft hurts. Oh yes, the theft. You hear about it first in whispers. A warehouse broken into. Not just any warehouse, but one connected to the state-run olive reserves. The thieves were careful, almost reverent. They left the empty amphory in perfect rows. Took only the oil. Left the wax seals unbroken. Who would do such a thing? Theories bubble like stew on a winter fire. Some say it was pirates again. Others blame a rival polis jealous of Athens' growing influence. One particularly theatrical vendor insists it was Poseidon, striking back with greased fingers of revenge. But the truth is probably more human. Someone needed oil. Lot of it. And they didn't want to pay. The city reacts the only way it knows how. More rules, locks, inventories. The Areopagus meets twice in 1 week. The guards at the Acropolis double in number. Even small pressers in the countryside are asked to submit their ledgers. And through it all, the trees keep growing. They don't know about policies. They don't care about theft. They just keep unfurling leaves, dropping fruit, waiting for someone with a basket and a bit of time. You find yourself walking through the Agra at dusk, passing stalls where fresh-pressed oil glows in shallow dishes. One seller beckons you closer. For dry skin, he murmurs, or salad. You buy a vial, just a small one. It smells like grass and pepper and something older than the gods. You hold it close and remember the tree. You tuck the little vial of oil into your robe, its warmth pressing against your ribs like a secret. The Agra has quieted, shadows stretching long across the stone as torches flicker to life along the walkways. And somewhere up on the Acropolis, Athena's olive tree shimmers faintly in the lamplight, still and watching. Tonight, the city prepares for a festival. Not the grand Panathenea with its parades and athletic contests that comes later. No, this is something quieter, older. Smaller ritual honoring the Moriae, the sacred olive trees said to be direct descendants of the original. And you've heard it whispered that something strange happens during these rituals. Something about temples, taboos, and the trees themselves. You make your way uphill again, past stone steps worn smooth by 100 years of prayerful feet. You pass a woman laying out garlands woven from laurel, myrtle, and olive sprigs. Her hands move automatically, as if memory has taken over. At the top, there it is. The sacred enclosure. Not a temple, not exactly, but not a garden either. It's a strange in-between space, part civic treasure vault, part grove. Marble columns frame the trees like portraits. Bronze plaques gleam softly on the walls, each etched with rules, dates, names of long-dead officials who once had the honor of tending Athena's gift. And in the center, the tree. The tree. Athena's original. Olive, or so they still believe. It looks weathered. The trunk is hollowed with age, its bark split and curling like scrolls left in the sun. But the leaves remain green, silvery, alive, and clinging to the branch tips are small, stubborn olives. Not many, but enough to prove the tree still works. One priest murmurs that the tree only bears fruit in years when the city asks nicely. No one challenges him. You stand near the edge of the enclosure, watching the ritual begin. A small procession enters. 3 women in saffron robes, barefoot and silent. Each holds a tiny bronze oil lamp, the flame guarded behind a curved windscreen. They walk in a circle around the tree 3 times, then kneel. Behind them, an old man stooped and sun-spotted, the city's current epimeletes, or tree warden, places a bowl of oil at the tree's base. It overflows deliberately, soaking into the earth. A drop hits his foot and he doesn't flinch. You see now, the tree isn't just sacred, it's sacred on paper, codified, tethered to an entire structure of law. and ritual so precise it feels like something. Athena herself would have diagrammed with a straight-edge dot, and with structure comes taboo dot, because certain things are not allowed here. You don't touch the bark without permission. You don't eat the fruit. You don't take clippings, even if they fall naturally. You don't turn your back to the tree during certain ceremonies. You don't enter the enclosure with shoes. You don't speak Poseidon's name here, not loudly, not even if you claim it's a joke. One boy did, years ago. His family moved to Thessaly shortly after, not out of punishment, out of embarrassment, because the city may argue, may vote, may bicker over tax codes and land disputes, but when it comes to this tree, it agrees. Don't mess with it. Historians still argue whether the sacred tree in the Erechtheion, the small Ionic temple built beside the Parthenon, was the original or just the most venerated descendant. The stories blur. The stones don't speak. But the reverence remains. You walk around the edge of the enclosure, keeping your distance. Tiny brass pins mark the places where previous guardians have made repairs. One column bears faint scorch marks, possibly from the Persian sack of 480 BCE, when the invaders razed much of the city. Legend says the tree burned and regrew the next day. That detail is debated, of course, but people believe it, because a tree that survives fire, invasion, time, and endless bureaucracy, that's more than myth. That's civic magic. You pause at a smaller shrine nearby set lower to the ground, easy to miss. It houses a kylix, a shallow drinking cup filled with rainwater. It's meant for the owls. No one says it aloud, but many believe the owls are Athena's eyes, that they report back to her, that they nest only in trees she favors. And this grove, legend claims, never lacks owls. You hear one now low and soft, somewhere up in the eaves. Maybe she's listening. The ritual ends with silence. No applause, no speech. Just the last flame extinguished and the saffron-robed women standing quietly before walking away. Barefoot, their feet smudged with oil and dirt. You stay behind a moment longer, because tonight the trees feel heavy, full of memory, of names whispered during sacrifices, of lovers who met beneath branches and rebels who plotted there, and farmers who looked up and prayed for fruit in dry years. A tree cannot record history, but it can contain it, like a sponge, soaking up everything that happens nearby, which is why, now and then, someone still tries to carve their initials into the bark. It rarely ends well, not because the tree strikes them down. It's just everyone sees. And the city doesn't forget. You step back slowly, carefully. You bow not out of belief, necessarily, but out of a kind of shared respect. A recognition that some stories grow roots deeper than laws, longer than lifetimes. The torch nearest you gutters, then flares again. The tree sways slightly in a breeze you didn't feel, and just for a second, the air smells like crushed leaves and something older, something watching. The grove is quiet now. The saffron-robed women are gone. The torchlight flickers against pale marble, casting long, wavy shadows from the olive branches above. You're still standing near the sacred enclosure, just far enough outside its bounds to not offend tradition, but close enough to feel the hush settle on your shoulders. Then faint footsteps. A figure approaches from the side, slow, careful, scanning the path like someone with too many secrets and not enough shoes. It's a young man, you guess, a student maybe, or an apprentice. His tunic is a little too new for a farmer and too worn for a noble. The look of someone with just enough status to be ambitious and just enough desperation to do something foolish. You're not supposed to be here, are you? He stops at the outer edge of the grove, looks both ways, then, very gently, kneels beside one of the younger sacred trees. Not the tree, capital T, but still one of Athena's Moriae, her sacred offspring. And then he does it. He plucks a single olive. Just one. But in this city, that's more than enough. You don't move. You barely breathe. Because even though no guards are posted tonight, this is a quiet ritual. After all, you know how quickly rumors move in Athens, how fast eyes turn, how sharp words become when mixed with faith and olive oil. The young man tucks the fruit into a pouch, slips away, and just like that, the crime is done. You hear whispers the next day, a guard speaking softly to a priest, a merchant folding his arms too tightly. The words olive and taken and witness swirl through the agora like bees around crushed figs. Someone saw. Someone always sees. By dusk, the Areopagus is convened. The theft of sacred olive fruit is not a crime punished by silence. It is investigated, documented, and if proven true, prosecuted with all the solemnity of divine offense. A tribunal is called. The accused is brought forward. He claims ignorance, a bold strategy in a city that teaches sacred laws alongside basic math and poetry. But perhaps not surprising, who wants to be exiled for a snack? Historians still argue whether any individual was ever truly punished for picking a sacred olive, or if the legal texts that mention such cases were more performative than practical. But the records show trials, fines, at least one exile, and every version ends the same way. Don't touch the Moriae. The young man is sentenced not to death, not even to exile, but to public apology and reparation. He's made to stand before the tree with the entire city watching. He must pour oil at its roots. He must explain his mistake. He must promise never to do it again, which is, in a way, worse than exile. Athenians value cleverness, but they also value knowing where the lines are and how not to cross them. You watch the punishment unfold from a shaded portico nearby. The tree, of course, doesn't react, but the crowd does, quietly, with head shakes, with narrowed eyes, with the kind of collective judgment that settles deep in the bones of a city and lasts longer than any decree. The boy becomes part of the story now, not as a villain, but as a warning. And the tree? It keeps growing. It sheds the leaf. It drops the fruit. It watches the mortals scurry to ascribe meaning. Later that week, the temple releases a statement, a public reminder of sacred law. But it's written with care, and beneath its formal language you can feel a kind of weariness. The tree has become more than sacred. It has become burdensome. Because here's the trouble with sacred things. You can't change them, even when they crack, even when they stop bearing fruit, even when they stand in the way of a new foundation or road or sunlight, gathering space. The city wants to grow, but the trees do not move. So they build around them. Walk now through a residential district that had to bend its streets just slightly to avoid an ancient olive trunk. Its roots buckle the pavement. Its shadow leans across 3 homes. No one has the nerve to cut it down. Instead, they build benches, hang lanterns, whisper apologies if they accidentally drop olive pits nearby. One elderly woman tells you she leaves offerings every week just in case. Another insists her arthritis is worse when the tree is angry. These aren't religious statements. Not exactly. They're cultural ones. The sacred is habitual now, ingrained. No longer a question of belief, but of identity. The theft, small as it was, only cemented that further. Past the offender one morning, sweeping a public stairway. It's part of his penance. He doesn't meet your eyes, but he hums softly, a tune you recognize from the last festival. A hymn to Athena. Maybe he's learned, or maybe he's just trying to move on. Either way, the city remembers. But so does the tree. And when you pause again beneath its branches, brushing your fingers over the rough bark, you swear it feels warmer than stone. a little soft, like it's absorbing something, like it knows. You step away from the grove, your thoughts trailing like incense smoke. The city feels different now. Not louder or quieter, just thicker, somehow. As if all its streets are steeped in stories like that boy and the olive. Things that happened. In the open, witnessed by gods and mortals alike, never quite fading. Only layering, settling. Compost for history. You wander through the agora, and it's still bustling. Philosophers perched on stone benches argue in circles. Merchants haggle, with mock offense. Children dart between amphorae, trailing olive pits and giggles. The sacred tree feels far away, but it's never really gone, because here in Athens, the olive isn't just a tree. It's an institution, a livelihood, a status symbol. A metaphor so deeply rooted in identity that it's hard to tell where the branch ends and the city begins. You pass a stall selling oil in tiny ceramic bottles, their spouts sealed with beeswax and twine. Each one bears the mark of an owl and a stylized olive sprig official stamp of the state. Only oil from the Morii groves is permitted this branding. Anything else risks fines, confiscation, even a slap on the wrist from the priestly class. Metaphorical, of course, but still embarrassing. Historians still argue whether the monopoly on sacred olive oil was a clever economic strategy or a theological flex. Likely both. What better way to fund civic pride than by bottling it? You pause to examine one of the jars. The seller smiles, waves a ladle with exaggerated elegance, and offers you a sniff. The scent is sharp green, earthy, with just the faintest floral tinge. It's said to taste better than regular oil, though you suspect half the flavor is psychological. And expensive. A single amphora can buy a small plot of land in rural Attica. Maybe a boat, if you're persuasive and the boat leaks a little, you decline, politely. Instead, you follow the scent trail down the winding alleys behind the agora toward. The oil presses dot here, things are messier. Louder, real. Olives are piled in huge wicker baskets, sorted by ripeness. Some are already turning, soft and sour. Those go into cheaper oils good for lamps and soaps. The best olives, fat, firm, gently bruised from handpicking, are whisked into shaded courtyards where presses groan and sweat under slow mechanical force. You watch one team work. Two men turning a heavy wooden screw while a third guides the mash beneath a weighted stone disc. The oil drips out golden, slow as honey, into a clay basin. Another man skims off debris with a curved ladle dot. It's hypnotic in a way. The rhythm, the smell, the warm gloss of oil against terracotta. You close your eyes and imagine the process. Stretched across centuries. Ancient presses powered by donkeys. Later, water wheels in the Roman period. Still later, hand cranks returning in medieval lean times. And always, olive oil, used for food, for medicine, for ceremony, for cleaning skin, lighting lamps, waterproofing sandals, appeasing gods. The lifeblood of Mediterranean civilization. Thicker than water, richer than wine, and far more stubborn to clean if spilled on your tunic. Worker waves you forward. Grinning. He hands you a small cube of bread barely toasted and dips it directly into the fresh oil. You chew slowly. It's delicious, grassy, a little peppery at the back of your throat, and entirely illegal if it came from a sacred tree. But this batch, he assures you, is from the outskirts, a private grove. No divine complications. You nod and thank him. But you wonder how anyone truly knows. After all, roots wander, branches bend. Trees don't carry passports. That's the trouble with sacred geography. It has very blurry borders. You leave the presses behind and head toward the hills where groves stretch in lazy rows across sun-blasted slopes. You pass shepherds, stone markers. A carved stele that once told land boundaries but has long since worn down to a wavy frown. And then, more trees dot so many trees. Some squat and gnarled, older than philosophy. Others young and eager, their bark still soft and green. You imagine Athena, walking here, brushing her fingers across the leaves. Maybe smiling at how things turned out. Maybe not. Because while the tree she planted remains, so much else has shifted. Athens isn't the power it once was. Empires have risen and fallen like summer figs. The Parthenon has changed gods more times than some families change sandals. The stones are cracked, the stories frayed, but the olives? Still here, still pressed, bottled, sold, debated, taxed, and revered. You reach a small shrine tucked between two trees. It's barely a structure, just a low wall, a worn statue, and a weathered offering bowl. Inside the bowl, a few coins, a dried flower, and a dollop of oil that's already gone cloudy in the heat. No priest watches this sight. No law guards it. And yet, someone came here. Someone poured out a little hope, a little gratitude, maybe someone came here. Little grief, because that's the real power of sacred things. Not their official status, not their punishments or policies, but the way they collect meaning, quietly, patiently. Over time, you press your hand gently to the bark of one nearby tree. It's warm, rough, solid. You whisper something, just a breath of a thought, and for a moment, it feels heard. Not by Athena, necessarily. Just by the tree, and maybe that's enough. You stay by the tree for a long while. The wind moves through the grove like a slow exhale, brushing over the leaves and stirring the faintest scent of dust and oil. There's a hush here that you didn't notice at first, a hush not of silence, but of listening. The olive trees listen. That's the feeling that wraps around you now. That even though they don't speak or stir or judge, they're always paying attention. And not just to you, to everything. To the pigeons nesting above. To the children chasing each other down the path. To the sun rising and falling for the 1000th time over the same stubborn hills. You turn back toward the city, feet crunching over brittle twigs. A cicada chirps somewhere, then another. A chorus slowly tuning itself for evening. Back inside the city walls, life continues as if nothing sacred ever grew there. Vendors shout. Fish sizzle. Debate clatters like dice on stone steps. You pass a sculptor smoothing the edge of an amphora with a worn chisel. His hands are thick with clay dust, and there's a streak of green paint on his neck like an accidental laurel. You pause just for a moment. What are you painting? You ask. He doesn't look up, just says, a tree. Of course he is. You lean closer, and sure enough, there it is on the urn's curve. A stylized olive tree. Its trunk coiled like a dancer's spine. Its leaves sharp and tidy. At the base, a figure kneeling, perhaps a farmer, perhaps a priest. Hard to tell. Greek art was never big on name tags. You smile, because even when they're not saying her name, they're still drawing Athena's story, still sculpting it, singing it, acting it out with oil lamps and stolen olives and ceremonial jars. She's not just a goddess here. She's a genre. Historians still argue whether worship of Athena was more about civic virtue or supernatural awe. But it's likely both. She represented reason, but also rules. Strategy, but also stubbornness. Wisdom and warfare, hand in hand. You pass a group of boys throwing olives at each other. They're laughing, dodging, shouting insults borrowed from comedy, plays and school recitations. One of them pretends to be Zeus, bellowing from atop a wagon. Another, Athena, twirling a broken branch like a spear. They don't realize it, but they're reenacting a myth that shaped their city. You imagine what Athena would say, watching them, probably something dry. Possibly a lecture, or maybe nothing. Maybe she just nodded after all. Children throwing olives aren't the enemy. They're the echo. You drift toward the Acropolis, the evening light gilding its columns. A warm golden hush has settled over the marble, catching in every carved owl and olive frieze. The Parthenon looms like a quiet drumbeat, still proud, still cracked, still hers, and still visited. Tourists yes, even in ancient times, make pilgrimages. Here, from Delphi, from Thebes, even from foreign lands. They come to see the temple, the statues, the great bronze doors, and if they're lucky, to glimpse the sacred tree, though few ever do. The real one, the ancient one, is mostly off limits, guarded not by swords but by silence, by ceremony, by the unspoken agreement that you don't gawk at what you can't understand. But everyone brings an offering anyway. Sometimes it's a coin, sometimes a poem. One boy, a few days ago, laid down a small clay whistle in the shape of an owl. The priestess who swept the path left it where it was, because you never know what the gods will find amusing. You pause on the temple steps and glance back down over the city. The rooftops glow. The wind carries music. And the olive trees, those persistent, wrinkled sentinels dot the landscape, like commas in a very old sentence that never really ends. You're thinking now about the first tree again. The one Athena planted. Was it a real tree? A symbolic one? A post-war propaganda stunt designed to boost morale after some particularly bad farming year? Historians still argue, but it doesn't matter, because what's more powerful than a tree? Planted by a goddess? A tree believed to be planted by a goddess. That's the trick. That's the spell. Belief is what waters myths. What keeps them from drying out in the sun? You descend the steps. A poet stands in the corner of the plaza reciting verses about olives and moonlight and dreams. Most passers-by don't stop, but one girl does. She listens, eyes wide, lips parted, as if the words are revealing a secret only she can hear. Later, she might write her own poem, or plant her own tree, or dream of one. You pass beneath another tree. This one unmarked, unfamous, just a regular olive tree in a regular corner of the street, leaves fluttering like hands waving you onward. You stop. Touch the bark. It feels alive, not sacred, not divine, just real. And in some way, that's better. You think about all the trees that came after Athena's, the ones planted in her honor, in her shadow, in her memory. You think about how each one is both an echo and a beginning. Each branch holds not just fruit, but story. Each leaf catches light and lets it go. And somehow, in all of that, the city remains. You wander slowly now, letting the slope of the city carry you downward like water flowing toward the sea. The streets are thinning. Viagra is mostly empty, its stalls packed up, its philosophers drifting toward late dinners or long arguments about nothing at all. You hear a lute somewhere, soft and slightly out of tune, paired with the thud of sandals and the hush of twilight breath. The olive trees are still watching, but more gently now. Their silhouettes flicker against the last hints of sun, their branches stirring like sleepy scribes flipping pages. You pass a column carved with trophies and military honors, the kind of thing meant to inspire awe. But even here, someone has scratched a little olive branch into the base, just a tiny one, no bigger than a child's pinky. It looks rushed, like it was carved by a homesick soldier or a bored teenager waiting for a procession to pass. Still, it's there, Athena's reach, again. Not through thunderbolts, but through doodles. You find yourself back near the old walls, where the city and countryside blur. Here, the ground is uneven. The streets aren't paved with showy marble. It's quieter, more chickens, more smoke from cooking pots, fewer statues of gods, and yet, The olive trees grow taller here. Maybe it's the soil, or the quiet, or just the lack of foot traffic. One tree leans over a crumbling stone fence, its branches dangling like gossiping fingers. You stop under it, watching its shadow stretch across the dirt path. You imagine again that first moment, Athena stepping forward in the contest, raising her hand and letting her spear strike the earth. Did she smile? Was there a pause? Did Poseidon scoff before the tree even finished sprouting? You like to think so. Historians still argue whether the story was ever meant to be taken literally. Some say it was allegory for a shift in economic focus from war to agriculture. Others think it was political branding, designed to promote olive oil exports under the comforting veil of divine favor. But you're here for the tree, because something in that gesture, choosing fruit over fury, patience over splashy drama, just feels like wisdom. Athena didn't win because she was louder or flashier. She won because what she gave was useful, tangible, lasting. You touch the bark again. It's rough, flaky, slightly sticky with sap in one crevice, but it smells real, clean, bitter sweet. The kind of thing that sneaks into your memory and anchors there without fanfare. You settle down at the base of the tree, not quite sitting, just crouching. The earth is warm from the day, the breeze cool on your cheek. In the distance, you can hear someone telling a story, probably to a child. Something about heroes and monsters. The usual bedtime fare. But part of you wonders how many of those stories include the trees. They're always there, in the background, as shade, as setting, as plot device, but rarely as the point. And yet, here you are, cradled in myth, beneath a canopy that started as a god's offering and became everything else. Oil for lamps, wreaths for winners, shade for debates. Wood for carvings. Fruit for the table. And story. So much story for the soul. You think about how many lives touched this bark, how many fingers traced it, how many feet passed beneath these limbs, and how many of them forgot. Because trees don't demand memory. They just grow. Slow, stubborn, solid. They outlast the gossip, the glory, the gold. They are, in a way, the quiet gods now. You stretch your legs, careful not to crush a patch of clover, and wander further into the darkening fields. The city sparkles behind you like a necklace lost in the grass. Ahead, another grove. This one smaller, younger, saplings mostly, spindly, hopeful. You kneel beside one. It's barely the height of your chest. Its branches thin, its leaves more silver than green under the moon. You press a finger to its trunk, whisper something. A wish? A memory? A joke? Doesn't matter. The tree hears you, not because it understands, but because it doesn't have to. Myths are real now, not in the way of monsters and gods and thunder, but in the way that things endure, are useful, are loved, are noticed, are not noticed. In the way a single olive pit tossed into dry soil becomes a thread that weaves through the whole history of a people. You brush your fingers clean on your tunic, tasting salt and bark. A dog barks in the distance. A cicada chirps once, then goes quiet. The air smells of lavender and dust and stone. And underneath it all, olive. Always olive. Always. By now, the moon has climbed high enough to silver the tops of the olive trees and dust the stones with that faint, enchanted shimmer that only exists when most people are already asleep. You've wandered beyond the last fences, past the noise, past the mythic heart of the city. And here, with the grass crushed softly under your sandals and the cool air brushing your cheek, you pause one last time. Just you and the trees. You look back at Athens, its rooftops and terraces, the long curled tail of torchlight winding up the Acropolis like fire made polite, and think about everything Athena gave, and everything people took. The olive tree may have won her the city, but what she really gave was a structure, a code, a kind of promise that life could be more than chaos and teeth and shouting gods, that a society could bloom from patience, cultivation, and restraint. Well, mostly restraint. Even now, the wind carries up a drunken song from the heart of the city. Something about wine and politics. You smile. Athena would probably roll her eyes, then suggest an alternate verse in perfect dactylic. HEXAMETER. The tree behind you creaks gently in the breeze. You step forward and run your fingers along a low-hanging branch. The olives are nearly ripe, fat and smooth, tinged with that deep green-purple hue that signals just a few more days of sun. You pluck one, more for the gesture than the taste. They're terrible raw, but still sacred in their own sour way. And isn't that what myths are? Something sacred wrapped in something bitter? Something that needs pressing, fermenting, time and patience before the story becomes useful? You chew. Wince, spit politely. Still needs work. You whisper to the tree. It agrees. Nearby, a small shrine glows faintly with the last of its oil. Just a flat stone, a carved owl, and a little offering bowl filled with ash and a single olive pit. Someone's nighttime prayer? Maybe. Or an apology. Or just habit. You kneel beside it, not to pray, just to rest. The stones are warm under your knees. The air smells like dusk and myth and the kind of sleep that tugs at your shoulders like a very polite ghost. You think of Athena not as a goddess now, but as a kind of presence. Something cool and sharp, the smell of ink, the clatter of armor never drawn, the sound of thinking out loud. She was always different from the others. Less lightning, more logic, less seduction, more strategy. The kind of goddess who knew the price of things, who counted consequences like others counted sheep, and somehow that made her more dangerous, more demanding. But also oddly more human. Historians still argue whether she was born fully formed from Zeus's head as the myths claim, or if she evolved more slowly from older regional goddesses, gaining logic and martial discipline as society demanded it. It doesn't matter, because what she became was real. To them. To you. You press your palm into the earth beside the shrine, fingers spreading into the dust like roots. And you realize that Athena's olive tree was never just a gift. It was a challenge. Can you grow something from this? Can you make it last? Can. You build and protect and serve without needing applause or thunder or your name etched in stone. It's a very goddess of wisdom kind of dare. One that doesn't end with marble statues or dramatic speeches, but with hands in the dirt, with pruning shears, with stubborn roots and dry summers and harvest baskets woven from patience. You yawn. The stars have moved. A cool breeze rolls down from the hills, and the trees whisper one last time. You listen. To the leaves. To the city. To the slow, olive-slicked heartbeat of a myth that never ends. Only softens. The lamp sputters out behind you. A branch creaks overhead. You exhale. Not a goodbye, just a pause, because the tree's still there. And so are you. The night has quieted now, drawn its shawl over the rooftops and left only the hush of crickets and the soft sway of branches in the moonlight. You've walked the olive groves, sat at Athena's feet. You've tasted the myths, pressed them between your palms like ripe fruit, felt their weight, their sap, their silence. Now, you let it go. Let the torchlight fade. Let the voices recede. Let the city grow small behind your eyes as sleep stretches out like a winding path, lined with trees that shimmer faintly under the stars. Your breathing slows. The earth settles beneath you. Somewhere, far off, a breeze catches a curtain, a cat curls into a basket, a drop of oil flickers in its lamp. The myths are still there, but they're quiet now. resting, like you, waiting, perhaps, for the next question. The next wanderer, the next whisper beneath the olive tree, but for now, let the branches hold you. Let the roots cradle your dreams, and let your thoughts fall away, like leaves released in autumn, each one lighter than the last dot until there's nothing left but hushed dot and the slow, soft turning of the night.